Hello and welcome to another edition of the Mabe podcast. Today we have our first ever return guest, Dr. Andrea Honigsfeld. Hello, Dr. Honigsfeld.
Hi, I'm so excited to be back and really honored that you wanted to have another chat with me. And I'm just so excited to be able to talk about something that I'm very passionate about, and that's supporting multilingual learners in so many different ways. So I know that our conversation today will be quite different from the previous one.
Yeah. So last time we talked about storytelling with multilingual learners. And Dr. Honigsfeld, you're known very well in the state of Michigan for your work on co-teaching. You've written several books on that. I feel like you've got a lot of books in the pipeline. It seems too like you're just an expert collaborator. So I bet at a given moment, you're probably working on a lot of different things with a lot of people. Am I correct?
Absolutely. And since you mentioned that a lot of educators in Michigan know my work about collaboration, co-teaching, co-planning, and so forth, Maria Dove is my frequent collaborator in that context, but she and I also know that we have to sometimes dig a little deeper. We keep going deeper and deeper into the topic of collaboration. What are those common denominators that we could determine so that the collaboration is even more effective? So that's how I continue to expand my research, my publications, and the opportunities to tell educators about what I'm working on.
Yeah. So today, and when I saw this book and now that I've experienced it, it's just let's just say it's 9 dimensions of scaffolding for multilingual learners. You can hold up. I have mine too, but I'll let you represent. Okay. So, I mean, such an important topic and so nuanced. I love that you use the word dimensions because again, it seems like it's more than a spectrum. It just goes in all directions, and depending on the student, for lack of a better phrase, I would say it's here and there and everywhere. As long as you're being intentional about it. It shouldn't be here and there and everywhere because you don't know what you're doing. But if you're really on top of it, then that is exactly it. And you're making these informed decisions. So before I pass it on to you, the first question, I just want to read the first sentence in the book because I was just opening it and I said, oh, this is great. Let's all read along. Can you point to the first word and we'll track the print? There, yes, why scaffolding? All right, I'm going to read it. Scaffolding instruction is not just another teaching approach to learning. It is a critical non-negotiable for multilingual learners. So, with that preface, start us off. What is scaffolding and why is it particularly important for multilingual learners?
Since you read the first sentence, maybe I'm going to read the second one because it says it is a lifeline to language development, academic achievement, and a profound sense of belonging. So we have long been talking about content and language integration, that we can't wait until the students have acquired English and have full proficiency in English and then start learning math, science, social studies. And now we also added that social emotional dimension to our work. So that's why that second sentence that I added just continues to answer your question. Why is it a non-negotiable? Why is it so critical for us to find that common denominator that all educators, regardless of grade level, content area, background, certification, readiness, I think we all have to embrace the notion of scaffolding.
Yes, absolutely. And you start off, I don't know what to tell you the page because I know you're going to look it up. So I'm just going to catch you off guard. But you mentioned the price of one size fits all instruction. And this really resonated with me because there's just that overlap between remediation. There is some overlap. We can't deny that because our newcomer multilingual learners and other multilingual learners who are still developing, they need supports. But the way that gets confused with intervention is it can be really problematic. And again, I think as educators and within our school systems, we have to be very careful that we're separating those two. And again, that we're not looking at it as an intervention or taking an intervention approach. And as you mentioned in your book, a single track teaching method often leads to an over-reliance on remedial programs for multilingual learners that pull them from general education classrooms for instruction. So let me tell you what I think that looks like, and you can correct me, tweak it, add to it. But basically, multilingual learners, so as defined by the proficiency assessment, and here in Michigan it's WIDA, they're not at proficiency. And when they're in their mainstream classroom, they just get what everybody else gets, largely devoid of scaffolds. And so they can't really keep up with the work because they need the linguistic accommodations. They're not getting it in the core content. And so therefore they just kind of get put in remediation. And also oftentimes they might get pulled, but it's not related to the core content. And it is really, it's oftentimes intended in programs that are intended for remediation, not for language development. How did I do?
Well, you just summarized all the challenges that we're facing every single day, whatever your job is, whether you're working directly with multilingual learners, you're in a coaching position, you're in a leadership position, or I'm a teacher educator. I teach pre-service and in-service teachers, as well as do a lot of professional development. That's the challenge that you summarized, indeed. And I like to actually say that you can't remediate what you haven't built yet.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in the business of construction. We're building, supporting our students to build new language and literacy competencies. So how could we remediate what hasn't been built yet? Because remediation is facing backwards, building a new language, developing language and literacy, as well as the social emotional competence to be able to not just survive, but thrive in a new country, in a new context. That's forward facing. So I think that's where that tension is with remediation being backward facing and language and literacy development must be forward facing. So that's why we scaffold up. I think a lot of educators have heard this already. And and I just want to give a big, big shout out to my co-authors, Maria Dove and Carrie McDermott Goldman, that we too believe in scaffolding up and not scaffolding down or lowering the expectations. So these are those tensions that you also summarized in your reflection. Yeah.
Yes. And we had on the podcast, I was fortunate enough to get Tanya Ward Singer, who also does a lot of great work with, she says, choose or lose. Like you have to be very deliberate in how you scaffold or you're going to miss out. And that's why too, especially with newcomers, lower proficiency students, the needs are so divergent because you could have a student who comes and they're at grade level or even above. They were in their home country and they just don't have the language. And that's a very different need than a student who comes and does not have literacy in their first language, or even a student who's been in the United States schooling system for a long time, maybe their whole career, and they're just having other problems developing English. Like they're just very divergent needs. And so getting your finger on the pulse is just essential. So could you tell us? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's why there's not one different definition or one dimension of scaffolding. So connecting back to why you like the title of the book, or the way it is positioned as something that's dynamic, that's fluid, that's multidimensional, rather than, okay, here's the word box and here are the sentence frames and then we're all done. Because sadly, a lot of teachers' guides limit that English language support to the sidebar, to the margins, quite repetitive in the way that they define scaffolding. So that's why Maria, Carrie, and I were so motivated to try to open up that understanding, or that rather limited understanding of scaffolding, to be a lot more nuanced, layered, multidimensional.
So how should a teacher approach it as far as looking at students' backgrounds when it comes to scaffolding?
Well, we start with instructional scaffolding because that's what the business we're in. We teach. We have instructional priorities. We have learning targets, content and language targets. But after that, immediately we address linguistic or language-based expectations. So both the content or academic expectations and the linguistic or language-based expectations will be our priorities. And after that, we keep looking at other dimensions of supports, such as multimodal, certainly visual literacy, visual supports, using all kinds of multimodal and multisensory instructional approaches have been around for a long time. So there's nothing that we claim in this book is totally original. Instead, we kept looking for research and evidence. So both in the published literature, as well as in the just as important experience of teachers in the classrooms, what works? what kind of scaffolds and supports do we have to put in place to make sure that we not just reach all the students, but also challenge them, invite them, engage them, and support them in fully developing as multilingual future leaders.
Mm-hmm. And that goes along with you always say start with an asset-based approach. Can you explain that a little bit? An asset-based approach?
Sure. So rather than looking at deficiencies or deficits, what is absent, what is missing, a child arrives in 5th grade, and obviously we can't reteach everything from kindergarten that they missed. We could certainly look at what did they miss. However, how on earth are we ever going to catch them up? Instead, again, let's take that future-oriented perspective, which is where are they heading? How can we look at everything that they already have and they bring with themselves into our schools, into our classrooms, and then create an accelerated curriculum for them so that they could also move forward. They often catch up or try to catch up to a moving target. The rest of the students are not waiting around for them. So that's, we have to make sure that we take into consideration all their talents, the prior knowledge that they have, the experiences, that experiential past that they bring with them, and then build on that. So that's where multidimensional, multilingual, multimodal, all these different multis that we talk about in this book come to play.
Yes, and especially with math and science, that's the same wherever you are on this planet, as far as I know. So also looking at that, so when a student first comes, they might not have the language, they might be shy, you might not be able to see what the prior academic knowledge is, but definitely with time, and as they can, talk a little bit more, it's good to know because it might seem like they don't know very much, but as they get more comfortable in the classroom and they acquire some English, oftentimes you can find that they know a lot of things. They have a lot of prior knowledge. It just wasn't apparent originally, or you might have to ask them, you might have to get it from them. They might not volunteer it.
And when we co-create rather, with our students, anchor charts or visual multimodal representations of the core content, they too can access the material. And there are quite a few of those pages that we could add into this podcast for the listeners and the viewers to see, because we wanted to show, not just tell the readers what scaffolding could look like. So we have so many full color, beautiful, authentic classroom-based illustrations that show other educators how this has already been done. And most of those examples will, again, build on what the students can access, what they already have. And that would be my key word for scaffolding. Rather than thinking about differentiating to creating 3, 4, 5 different levels of the exact same instructional material, inspired by UDL, Universal Design for Learning, my keyword or our keyword in the book is going to be access. Those multiple access points, multiple ways that the students can interpret or internalize new learning, as well as how they can express their understanding.
Yes, absolutely. And how does scaffolding fit with the gradual release of responsibility model?
Oh, well, we actually discussed that in great detail in one of our chapters, because that approach we would categorize as instructional scaffolding. So the classic version of it is I do, we do together, you do as learners together, and then you do it alone, those 4 steps. However, Fisher and Fry came out with the Gradual Release of Responsibility 2.0 version, in which they suggest that you don't always go in that order. And we agree with them 100%. Because there's inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, problem-based learning, place-based learning. There's so many other types of approaches to pedagogy, according to which we don't start with teacher modeling. We actually allow students to have that good Carol Dweckian struggle with the material. So that's why the gradual release of responsibility is also presented both by Fisher and Fry in our book as something that's more dynamic and more fluid and more responsive to the students' needs.
I love what I'm hearing, but it's one of those things where I'm just kind of processing it. How would inquiry-based learning fit exactly with the GRR model?
Yeah, so In a more deductive or more teacher-directed approach, the teacher would be modeling, let's say, an experiment, or would take the student step by step through a particular learning process, even solving a math problem. But in inquiry-based learning, we start by the students asking questions. So it starts with the you do. You alone do. You generate those questions. Even the classic KWL is somehow connected to that, because what do you know about a particular topic? So we're tapping into the students' prior knowledge. Then we ask the students, what do you want to know? So it's not earth-shattering that we're presenting here related to reviewing or reimagining the gradual release of responsibility. Everything is connected to well-established research-based and evidence-based practices. And I also wanted to highlight just the importance of tapping into students' prior knowledge, their funds of identity, their funds of knowledge, often the knowledge that's not even related what is ever taught in the classroom. So inviting that into the learning space, inviting the students to share about what they can do, what they are very good at, also starts with the I, what the student is bringing, rather than what the teacher is modeling for the students first. So it's a good balance that we need to strike. I'm not saying that, oh, we'll never model anything for our students. Not at all. We just have to be more dynamic. I keep going back to one of my favorite words, more dynamic and more fluid in our decisions regarding scaffolding.
So, okay, and then there was something else that I wrote in my notes. I wrote Pobre-Cito syndrome. Are you familiar with Pobre-Cito syndrome?
Sure.
Okay. So that's when that's basically low expectations. Like you look at your multilingual learner and you just say, oh, you poor thing. You need help. You don't know how to do the work. So I'm just going to lower expectations. I'm going to lower the bar for you, which again, if you have a newcomer who's, generally, coming from a rough place, I mean, yes, it's not like, every time, all the time, obviously. But overall, you want to have those expectations. You want to know and just kind of, monitor and look for where the bar is, where do we want them to be? What's the input plus one? But I would say though, however, Pobre-Cito syndrome, I would believe strikes when, you have a well-intentioned teacher or even system, but they just don't know what to do with the students. They don't know how to scaffold effectively. Maybe they know how to do a few things, but not in the dynamic way you're talking about. So with that, what advice would you give to somebody who is listening to this and saying, oh gosh, that's me, that's my school, that's my district, or whatever. Like we're really not doing this the way we should be. What remedy, and even if it involves your book, what do you think a teacher or a school system could do to make sure that they are putting the proper scaffolds in place for multilingual learners?
Well, I'd like to connect what you just discussed with the notion of agency. I know sometimes we throw around these big words, but what does that really mean? What does it look like? What does that feel like? So student agency means, even for the newcomer, that they're going to be able to reflect on their own learning. They can self-assess. They can set goals for themselves, periodic goals, with minimal language or bilingually, multilingually. So we have a lot of those self-assessment tools here in this book as well, because we also believe that we have to empower the students. We're not giving them a voice, they already have a voice, but we have to create space for that voice to be heard. And sometimes that voice is going to be multilingual. Sometimes it's going to be achieved through translanguaging pedagogy. Sometimes it's going to be achieved through multimodal expressions, participatory actions, so that the students show what they can do before they can tell you what they know.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to start winding down. I want to mention a very important event that's forthcoming. But before we do that, was there anything else you wanted to add on this topic?
Well, just very excited to think about how originally I was inspired by Rita in the 15 Essential Actions book, putting out 3 levels of supports. And that was our starting point. And we, for a long time, we, meaning Maria and Carrie and many others, truly focused on those 3-dimensional, already referred to it as 3-dimensional approach to scaffolding. And those were graphic, interactive, and sensory. You remember that? That's like
yes,
that neat chart. Yes. And then Maria and I started presenting more and more on a 5-dimensional approach to scaffolding, especially in our co-teaching book, that let's just add at least 2 more dimensions. Let's make sure that we focus on instructional and linguistic scaffolds, because how could we forget about those 2 essential dimensions? So now we were up to 5. And then we started doing a lot of research during COVID when we had all that time on our hands.
Yeah.
So we found that indeed, these concepts of environmental scaffolding, digital scaffolding, multimodal scaffolding, things that we're introducing in this book do exist. So our contribution to the field is to pull it all together and to see scaffolding in a more systematic way. Rather than a checklist that in every 40-minute class period, you're going to need 9 dimensions of scaffolding. These are opportunities, springboards, and invitations for educators to consider based on the students' needs, based on the content or the context in which they operate.
Yes, and again, it's something too, if you do it long enough and you're intentional about it, a lot of it is semi-automatic. Like you just know to go to these things. It's not more work, you just do it. And it takes a lot of work to get there.
Yes.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. Before we mention, your socials and all that, I just noticed the tint of your top is I'm not sure what word I could use to describe it. Could you? Oh,
It's matching the book. This was
Oh.
really, really hard to find something like this, but that's one way that I have a lot of fun with my publications. Once a new book comes out and we decided on a color design, then I just find one outfit that will also match that cover design because I have to have fun with it.
yes.
Thank
And
you for noticing.
I believe you have a jeweler in the family too. Do you get any jewelry to go with that outfit?
Oh, yes, I have earrings as well as a ring matching. So I do the whole gamut. Why not?
Yes, absolutely. I love it. I love it. I love it. All right. So May 6th, Andrea Honigsfeld will be in the great state of Michigan as part of our MABI pre-conference talking about the dimensions of scaffolding and this book. So if you're able to attend that, you will not regret it. I know you're active on Facebook and Instagram.
And LinkedIn.
And LinkedIn, yes. And this book is published by Corwin, so we can, if we want to order this book, we can find it on the Corwin website.
Well, it's very, it's a great honor for us that the publisher also put together a companion website. So many of the tools can be downloaded and they are connected to the book. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So that's up and running. All right. Well, thanks very much, Andrea, Dr. Honigsfeld, for joining us. And we'll see you at MABE in May.
Thank you so much for having me.